Maybe a very, very challenging and maybe impossible question to answer. When you think about the maybe one or two biggest developments that, if they took place, would really accelerate tokenization, what would those things be? Are they regulatory oriented? I think, Chief, from your point, there's like the technologies there, but it's a question of how is it implemented and who are the different folks you're talking to? Are there certain developments that you think would drastically change the trajectory of how fast tokenization happens in certain markets?
No, I actually think that we're now all about adoption. I really think, like, a lot of times people say, are you excited about all the regulatory rules? Yes, very much excited. It's actually more that the posture of the US administration and the US regulators, to me, is much more exciting, because we believe that, the way we've built Canton is you can do tokenization within the regulatory framework that exists today. You don't need new regulatory changes necessarily to really mobilize it. And if that's the case, it's actually the posture and the excitement of the administration and the regulators of using this technology that have gotten all the clients very excited about using it. Therefore, I think from our point of view, it is really now just about rolling your sleeves up and getting to work and getting it done. I don't really think that there's anything missing to do that other than adoption.
And just quickly to maybe nuance adoption even further, in your mind, is it really all about the US market, just given how large that market is, how big the, sort of influences and setting standards like globally? I think I have this debate with friends all the time around, where is the center of gravity in terms of, interest and adoption globally, whether you're breaking it down to the Asia Pacific region, Europe, US. And obviously with the change in the posture in the US government, I think it feels to me like all eyes are on the US. I'm curious if you have any further nuance on how you think about sort of the adoption component geographically and whether that plays at all in your mind and strategy.
Listen, we operate globally, but the reality is the US market is just the largest market across the board. So, as a business, you need to kind of go where the puck is. And it's where I think the biggest opportunity is. But it's not only the biggest opportunity just with respect to the fact that the US market is the largest, but it's also because, all eyes are always on the US. Like, we remember before the current administration, everybody kept on saying the US is behind, the US is behind, the US is behind. And now suddenly everybody's trying to catch up with the US. So I think that the point that to me is much more important is if you go abroad and you're like, we did this with the DTCC, people go like, okay, that's good. Good enough, So it's like there's multiple elements why investing in the US is so important beyond just the fact that it's the largest market.
I was just at Money 2020, and I would say the most pervasive things that were spoken about at Money 2020 were stablecoins and then artificial intelligence. I'm curious whether you have any sort of view or take on where blockchain infrastructure intersects with AI-driven financial systems at all. And if you do, how you think about that relative to Canton and its value that it creates for institutions. Because I would think that if anything in an AI-based financial system type world, maybe dystopian as that might sound, Canton would have a lot of value just given what it does as it relates to privacy, as it relates to the other components you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is the following. First of all, I'm not a negative on hype. I'm a negative on hype that gets left hanging for too long without something catches up, right? Like, you must have hype. I mean, our attention span these days is so short that you need something in order to catch people's attention and get them focused on what you're trying to do. So hype is a good thing as long as it's followed by substance. With respect to AI, one thing that I try to tell people is one of the bad things about reconciliation, which is what we're saying we're going to get rid of, is that when you have 8 people doing the same transaction and they need to reconcile with one another, if one of them makes a mistake, the probability that all 8 made the same mistake is very low. And as a result of that, reconciliation is not just friction, it's also like, you can think about it like a strainer. It's a strainer for mistakes that then get caught and people fix them. which is a good thing, right? So a lot of times people will talk about one source of truth. Well, maybe you want to make sure that your one source of truth is actually the truth and nobody injected like bad stuff into your source of truth. And the reason I say that is in a lot of the projects that we work on, AI gets used almost like a safety mechanism before you inject things into a blockchain to verify the quality of the data and its authenticity and accuracy. That's one element. The other element that, I'm sure we're going to see, but I don't think it's unique to blockchain, is you have very structured data with very deterministic kind of like state transitions. And I can see already a future where agents will kind of like start automating state transitions on a blockchain. And the whole notion of using blockchain to prove that AI models are good ones or not, haven't put much thought to it. I think it's interesting. Again, I think that when people say things are immutable, we should be accurate with those statements because it's already been proven that blockchains are not necessarily immutable.
So we're really curious, if we look out, let's call it 2 to 5 years, and digital assets been wildly successful. What does that world look like in your view in terms of, are there, we have X amount of like global value or dollar value that's, being impacted? Are there certain products that you think that don't really exist today that are now commonplace? I'm just curious, like in that future state, what are you most excited about? Again, assuming that digital asset is like wildly successful beyond like your lofty, right, and big goals.
Sure. I'll give the following example, and I've been using it a lot. As a former trader, when you think about putting a trade, you have your alpha, which is what you think your edge is, and then you have your transaction cost. And transaction cost comes from multiple sources. The cost of your people, maybe, cost of your back office, regulatory fees, securities lending, all kinds of things. There's a whole list of what are your costs. And really, the edge that you have is your alpha minus your cost. And you kind of like think about like, well, what is my margin of my edge? And if it's not high enough, you kind of don't do the trade, right? Because the alpha is statistically what you expect to get. So you want to have a good buffer in there to make sure that you capture enough return. Like there's a lot of ideas that I think people would love to do, but the cost of putting that product is so high that before you even think of like pricing it, it's like nobody will buy this product. It will be so expensive that it's just not worth it. And so to me, what's exciting is that as we are reducing kind of like the cost of managing and settling assets all the way from equities to private assets, it's the opportunity of products that today are just not feasible. So one easy example is everybody's super excited about private credit. Private credit is growing dramatically. But let's say, Alex, you own $1 million of a private credit fund and it pays you like, I don't know, like, $80,000 a year, $90,000 a year. People can look at your issuer of the private credit and your cash streams. But today, to what I call perfect the security, put a perfect lien on the private credit, know that they are going to be the first to get paid until the loan is paid. Like when you start thinking about the back office, the middle office, the legal, all of that stuff, that's your cost. So now you have a loan that you expect to get some kind of a return, but you have this massive cost, and you're like, well, if I'm going to put this loan, I need to have X amount of margin, which will make the loan so expensive that nobody would ever take that loan. If I actually say I can actually pledge my private credit asset to you, like I said, like that Aave example, for less than $1 in real time, suddenly I can write really interesting loans on something like that, right? So to me, the real excitement for 5 to 10 years is I think that we are really in the first inning of seeing financial products that today would just not even be imaginable due to the friction that exists in the system are going to become available in the future. We're seeing already today, you talked about stablecoins and things like that. Just imagine how treasury management gets changed, where you could actually have agents. Anytime you have idle cash, we'll convert it into US treasuries or money market funds. You don't need to have wild imagination to see that already happening. And just that already at the click of a button will have better yields for any owners of assets, whether they are institutional or retail. That will have a dramatic positive effect on people's returns. The reason why that is possible is because now moving money all over the world 24/7 is possible, it's cheap, and also converting money into yield-bearing assets is also cheap, quick, 24/7. So those are things that you can start doing today already.